What's up, folks? My name is Melanie. I use they, them, theirs pronouns, and in this video, I'm gonna rank my 29 books that I've read so far in 2023 from lowest, number 29, to number 1, the highest. So let's get started. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications so you're always in the know when my next video comes out. So number 29 is the Octopus Museum. I'm kind of sorry for putting this last, but I'm also not that sorry for putting it last. But this book was just really sad. Poetry book, there's a lot of topics, some of them about climate change and climate injustice and hopelessness, and I just don't believe that that's the way that we have to go about it. And when we're pushing for things to change, and I'm sure it's a good poetry book for some, it just wasn't for me. Number 28 is The Surrender Experiment. This book had a lot of really good themes and messages on surrendering to life. I just felt like it was really weird that he was affiliated with people that were taking advantage of that space and that he himself had profited from that space. A lot of really good messages on surrendering to life and all that life will bring you. It just didn't line up. That's just where it was at for me. Also, I don't usually drink any caffeinated or sugary things, and I just had a milk tea packet and I'm wired. So maybe a little too excited for this book list. Number 27 is Bonds. This book is a huge deep dive into government bonds, treasury bonds, but as far as book writing goes, it was really dry. However, I do still recommend it if that's a topic of interest to you. I'm not in a position where I am looking to financially invest in bonds at this time, but because it's something that I don't know anything about, I really wanted to take the effort, dive into something to have at least a cursory knowledge of it. It gives you definitions on different kinds of bonds, research process, how to find bonds, where to find bonds, who you should consult. It is dense. I glazed over it. I do have a lot of notes that I'm still going through so that when I do want to invest in bonds, I'll have all of the notes in one place. Number 26 is Portrait of a Thief. So this was completely a pleasure read for me. It's about these Chinese American students who get hired by a museum curator in China to go to different museums across the world and steal art that belongs to China. And I think that's a really great concept in questioning these items that are placed in colonizers' museums and places of cultural significance. But what about the country it actually belongs to? And I think that's really important. I also love heist movies and TV shows like Money Heist. Amazing! That's the milk tea drink again. But yeah, I think it's a really important question to ask ourselves. Who do these items actually belong to and where should they actually be? But as a book itself, I just felt like it didn't do too much for me. But it was a fun read, like I said. Number 25 is The Prophet. So basically, this is someone's advice to many of life's qualms and quandaries like relationships, the law, science, how to approach these things in a very philosophical sense. It's a really quick read, and I didn't really get much out of it, but I really enjoyed the friendship chapter because that's a part of my life that's really important to me, and developing those relationships. You know, how relationships should be a give and take, and how you should be able to be absolutely yourself with your friends. And what I also thought was really cool was the author Khalil Gibran is a Lebanese American immigrant from the 1900s, a time in which the US is really shaping what the world is going to look like in its modernity, in its industrialization. And I'm not saying that's always a good thing, that's just a time period that represents. Number 24 is Blackmail and Bebinka. I really wanted to like this third installment of Tita Rosa's Kitchen Mystery series, but it was so weak, it was super predictable. So this is the formula. Some bad shit's gonna happen, a recovery, family thing that happens and unites them all, and then the thing's gonna get solved. And then that's the book. And I think that's something that all authors that write a series around a particular theme will struggle with, is how do you diversify that? Because it's a shorter book, it's harder to really build out other pieces of the story to make it a world building effort, which is the beauty of sci-fi and fantasy. That's why they're so big. They spend so much time building the worlds, insight into every piece of the village, insight into the hierarchy and the magic systems. This book was super predictable and the weakest out of the whole series. Number 23 is Polysecure. Polysecure is about polyamory, which is the act of being in relationships with more than one person, where all people are consensually agreeing to this arrangement. There's a lot more rules and complexities in polyamorous relationships than monogamous relationships, because the only rule in monogamous relationships is that I am with this person and that's it. And so this book is about how you build security within those kinds of relationships. And it's very different because it's not just you and one other person. It's you, another person, maybe another person, maybe another person, but all of the people within all of those people's lives. You know, your friends, the family units that you have within all of those structures, and what we all consider as safety within the relationship. And I think there's a lot of really great lessons that people in monogamous relationships can get out of here too. What does it look like to trust yourself, trust your partner, trust your partner's partners? While I am not polyamorous, I really want to be able to respect other people's approaches to life and love, because as long as people are consenting and as long as people are communicating, then why should I stop anybody from having those kinds of relationships? Number 22 is the Bhagavad Gita. This is an ancient Hindu text dating back to the first millennium BC. And I really read this because Jay Shetty was a monk, and this is one of the texts that he studied, and I was like, okay, sure, why not? I'll give it a try. So I really enjoyed seeing the similarities between this and other texts of religions that I've read. You know, being a good person, doing service to people, being pious to the religious god or whoever. People always think of difference rather than similarities when you're looking at various religions. Really, religions are just ideas that have been passed down for thousands of years, and it's usually the same lessons over and over and over, and they're just written differently from different countries. I'm reading because I want to expose myself to as many ideas as possible. Being aware of the different kind of religious dynamics that exist is part of that understanding of the world. So yeah. Number 21 is Version 0. So this was a really witty and entertaining read. It's a fictional satire on the biggest tech companies, how we act as a society. It is determined by the social media we have access to. And Version 0 is about a group of 3 trying to dismantle all of what those tech companies have set up so that we can get back to Version 0 when we're, seeing people as opposed to random strangers on the internet we can just bash unabashedly. I thought it was really fun. I wouldn't reread it. I think it was enjoyable, and if you're into the dystopian what if scenarios kind of genres, definitely in that range. Number 20, All About Love. This is by Bell Hooks. Incredible book. So I want to preface this that I tend to rate books based on the quality of the book and what I get out of them. That is what I learned. And for me personally, because I have a pretty robust understanding of love and the many ways that it can take form, I didn't learn too much from it. But basically the book talks about what if we operated from a place of love all the time? Would we have wars? Would we resolve conflicts in the way that we do if we express compassion and understanding at the forefront of our decision making? It's a really beautiful way of approaching life. For example, maybe there wouldn't be so many anti-trans bills in the United States if we operated from a place of care and wanting to welcome people rather than ostracize them. It was really well cited, and for something that was literally all about love, very academically cited. Lots of other book reads that I'm considering for adding to my book list. I definitely recommend it to anybody that is tired of approaching things in the same way we always have, which is bickering and not coming from a place of love. I know it sounds really cheesy, but it's good, okay? It's so good. Number 19 is The Heart Principle. This is a third installment from another series, which is a romance novel series, and it's kind of smutty and it's cute, and I would argue it's the best one. The character development was really good, overarching story cohesion, all of it just made sense. So I want to give props to Helen Huang, the author, to really see the author changing and okay, I'm gonna try this time, I'm gonna try this time, and I kind of saw that as I read all 3 books.
So what I was trying to get at here is that I saw Helen Huang really develop the characters in all 3 books very differently. In the first one, it was very romance heavy, very sexual, which I loved. But in the second one, there's a little more story, there's a little more character development, and in the third one, which is The Heart Principle that I read, I just felt the characters had so much more breadth within themselves, and the lesson that they were trying to learn just came out so much clearer in the third book. And I was like, oh, she's nailing the formula. And to see an author change and adapt and each book's weaknesses to make them strengths in the next one is really cool for a series, because series are hard. At the end of the day, you're trying to make a basic same theme out of all 3 series or whatever, how many series you have. And with smaller books like this one, it's 200, 300 pages, you don't have as much time to develop the characters. And I think she really found her niche here. And I can't wait to see what else she writes, because it was just so different the third time around. So that's what I was trying to get, and hopefully those layers make more sense this time. Okay, back to the video.
Helen Huang is on the autism spectrum, and so are her characters. And while it's not like the biggest part of the plot, it's nice to like know that other people exist that are on the spectrum and that they can do day-to-day things. Society ostracizes people that are on that spectrum, and it's really harmful. We all come from different places, and we need to come from a place of understanding. And love, all about love. Anywho, number 18 is Open Water. Reading this book was absolute poetry. It's one of those books that you read and you're like, what did I just finish? You wonder how you breathe in so much goodness and so much complexity from a really short book. So the main character is a young black man who lives in the UK. And so he ponders the life he has at home and the strains within his family as he traverses through romantic love and an understanding of himself, and how unfortunately being black is always in his mind, and not just like as an identity, it's how he knows he is perceived in the world. In every interaction he has, the way that he describes what it's like to say hi to a black person in a public space, knowing that you two get each other. It's moving, it's powerful, really well done, and like I said, it reads like poetry. I just swallowed this book, like inhaled this book. I highly recommend this if you want your soul to melt into open water. And that concept that diving into love and diving into another person and diving into yourself is like going into the unknown of open waters, and the depth of which, how it can be strangling, suffocating, and also really wonderful to you. Number 17 is Here's to Us. This is a sequel of another book I read, which is higher up on this list. It's about two young gay teenagers in New York City, and I didn't like the second book as much as the first book, but the second book did go more into friendships that they have that made them possible as a couple, and I think that was really cool. I always love not focusing so much on just the romantic love pieces of a story. Number 16 is Aristotle and Dante dive into the waters of the universe, and so this is another sequel to a book that I read last year. Aristotle and Dante are young teenagers that live in Texas, and they fall in love. That's in the first book. Not really a spoiler. That's the title of the book. And this one, I think, does a really good job of humanizing the parents and other adults in the story. That these people aren't just caregivers in our world, but they are also their own people. They all have their own doubts, their own qualms. We see our parents as like these oppressors as we go through our rebellious phases of being a teen, puberty, in high school. Growing up now, I have a much better understanding of my parents and the decisions that they made when I was younger. But as a teenager, I had no like... That was so distant from my mind. And as I got older, I figured out how to pull stories from my parents that they were really resistant to sharing because it was a lot of trauma for them that they experienced. And they also are so used to raising us that they can't always grasp the fact that we are our own thinking beings now, and we're adults that can understand what they went through. And so I really love that about the second book of the series. And I'm back. All right. Number 15, On a Sunbeam. This is a really awesome graphic novel, and it jumps from the present to the future. No. It jumps from the past to the present between the main character's high school experience and then their post-high school, like, adult working life balance. And the really cool part is it's in space and it's queer. So it's about queerness, chosen family, love. It's a really nicely done graphic novel. I think it's very wholesome. It's definitely a slower paced book, but I enjoyed that a lot because a lot of stories always jump so quickly from like this thing happened, that thing happened, that thing happened. But this one was just, oh, I kind of have to piece the whole story together. Number 14 is American Born Chinese. This is another graphic novel. It's about an ABC, which stands for American Born Chinese. He's the main character, and you kind of see him go through this whole self-hatred process because of how he's interpreted as a Chinese American, juxtaposed with the story of the Monkey King, who goes through similar things, not wanting to be seen as a monkey anymore, starts walking straight up as opposed to on all fours and with shoes instead of barefoot. It's now going to be a Disney series with Michelle Yeoh and Ke Huy Quan, which I'm going to put right here. Number 13 is There. I was gifted this book by a friend of mine, and we actually read it together, and I really recommend that, even if it's a month to get through halfway through the book and then another month to get to the other half. I think it's a really cool way to dialogue with your friends, to take things slow with a book. But I will say that I read books at a much faster rate than that. I usually read like 3 or 4 books at a time. So There is by a Native American author, and it's about Native American Indian experiences. People going through the mundaneness, through the harsh realities of their lives, struggling with their past, how that's made them into the person they are today, grappling with their Native American Indian identity, how that's really complex, and how some of them don't feel Indian enough, and some of them don't feel Indian at all. This is written in a really poetic way, similar to Open Water. So if you like that kind of style of writing that's very flow and it's got a very unique iambic pentameter, even though it's a book, that's kind of where this book lands for me. So at the end of the book, and the story alludes to this in the first few chapters, all of the characters meet. Their lives suddenly intersect at a powwow. And the question that I'm left with is, are we ever really there? For the fleeting moment that we are on this earth, were we actually here? So I'll leave that for you to decide. Number 12 is My Mechanical Romance. And I almost said My Chemical Romance because I'm sure that's what this is satired for. So this is a very wholesome, robotic team love story. Oh, the main character, she's new, she's smart, she's into building things, she's really quirky, really weird. The boy, he's the all-star sports robotics captain. The underlying theme and overarching message though, and I don't know if that made sense, it's that women are seldom in the STEM world, right? It's science, technology, engineering, and math. And how when they are, they're kind of pinned against each other because that space is largely for men. Non-males are never welcomed and they're seen as like the diversity hire or the diversity inclusion person. You're gonna check all of the boxes and now we're like an inclusive team, right? Obviously this happens in more than just robotics teams. So few people of this minoritized group that is women in this particular story that they suddenly feel like they have to compete when they should really be making space for each other. Number 11 is 5 Temptations of a CEO. This is another great book by Patrick M. Lencioni. I read another book of his last year. This author is actually a consultant for leaders of organizations and companies. And I have seen all of the temptations that are in this book in all of my bosses, where largely it's that the CEO cares more about themselves than they do about the organization doing well. See, when you're a CEO, when you're a leader of a company, your number one job is to get your organization to be the best that it can be at the task that it's supposed to be doing. It is not the CEO's job to make it all about them. I've seen people struggle with that because they want to use the platform of their leadership position to gain access to different parts of society, to influence more people. I think it's super insightful. And if you're not a CEO, I think it's still really good to know that there are red flags you can look out for when you're like picking which company to work for. Like, is this actually in alignment with who I am? Are they actually doing what they said they're gonna do? Ultimately, being a good CEO determines your ability to be a good team member and whether or not employees can trust the leadership to do what it is asked to do. Number 10 is the Almanac of Naval Ravi Khan. I'm gonna preface this with that I am not in the tech sector, but I do think it's really interesting to dive into leaders of other industries and see what we can learn from them. So Naval Ravi Khan is an angel investor from his company AngelList. What that basically means is that he has gained a trust of enough tech sectors and invested in like the next technology that he is seen as somebody that is trustworthy of making those decisions and really spearheading where technology is going to lead. So this book is a tidbit of like a lot of his knowledge from Twitter posts, talks, and interviews. It was very tangible, very bite-sized. I thought it was like a breeze to read. Earlier in this video, I mentioned that I want to have a foundational knowledge of a lot of range of topics that are outside of my comfort zone. Obviously, if you haven't noticed by the books that I read, LGBT topics, Asian American stories, personal development are at the very core of who I am. And so I invest a lot into learning more about that. But what he says really beautifully is that if you have a foundational knowledge of anything, you can apply that to every part of your life. You can be that much more ready to take on a conversation from anybody. And he also has a lot of recommendations at the end of the book, which are on physics and other hard sciences, different booming technologies. It's obvious that AI is going to be a bigger and bigger role in society. It's really cool to understand it from somebody in that sector. Number 9 is The Kindest Lie. This book is about a Black woman who has, since moving from her small town in Indiana to Chicago, has become a successful engineer, and then when she goes home to pay a visit to her family, realizes that there are secrets that her family has kept from her so that they could guarantee a certain life of success for her. And particular success, meaning that there are things that aren't guaranteed to Black youth. And it's about really humanizing those decisions that our elders do for us so that we can have access to life. And I actually audiobooked this one. It included African American vernacular English, and that just means that it was written from the voice of a Black person living in the United States. Number 8 is Springboard, and as I was going through this list, this book just kept moving up. Right now, as I'm defining what success looks like for me and what success has looked like for my friends, this book really owns in that there can be many definitions pursuing that 9 to 5. Not doing that. The definitions can change as you change as a person. This book is written by G. Richard Schell, and he's a professor at Wharton. He's been teaching us a book on success since 2002, and it's also available on Coursera. Not sponsored, by the way. I'm just putting the plug out there because I really enjoyed this book. It's about figuring out what our strengths are, what our personality is like, to be able to springboard us into a path that can help other people and that can be fulfilling for us. And it's a really gentle way and reminder to say that you can figure it out in your own time. Kind of along that same train of thought is number 7, which is the pathless path. Where I am currently in life, where I'm debating what my path will look like. This book really hit home to me that I think I have a non-linear, non-traditional path than most of my friends who are pursuing the same things that they did in undergrad and have kind of always wanted into their careers. And that's okay that they have that, but it's also okay that I don't have that. This book is analogous to how I've approached books in the last couple of years. What have I not exposed myself to? What can I dive deeper into? That it's okay to question all of these things about myself. Where I am currently allows me a level of financial comfort, but I know that it's not engaging me intellectually in the ways that I really want from a job. And I know that I'm not looking for passion right now because I like being able to leave my work at work and being able to come home and read as much as I want and talk to my friends, have more creative juices flowing out of me because I'm not really utilizing them at work. The pathless path is figuring out what that path looks like for you. Creating it as you go is fine. And it's okay that it doesn't look like what your other peers have done. If your path currently looks more wonky than everyone around you, that means you're figuring it out, and it means you're gonna exhaust all the possibilities until you figure it out. And you will. I know that you will, so trust in yourself that you will. Number 6 is What If It's Us? The second book was the one that I mentioned earlier, Here's to Us. This was really cute and filled that part of me where it's okay to romanticize things about love and to kind of go for it in life. Take that risk. Be selfish and ask for what you want in this world. Number 5, Ash. Yes, this is another LGBTYA. This is about Aisling, or Ash, and it's actually a Cinderella retelling. The author is Melinda Lowe. This is my 3rd book that I read from her, and it's a lesbian, queer, retelling of Cinderella. The biggest theme here is Cinderella, Ash, is grieving her parents. Her mother died, then her dad died. Then she plays into her stepmother's life with her 2 stepsisters. What does it mean to grieve parents? What does it mean to find yourself outside of the definitions of society and what love looks like? Be ready, because this book will tug at your heartstrings. Number 4, I Guess I Live Here Now. So this book is about a New York teenager who is about to start her junior year of high school until her parents tell her that they are now moving to Korea to be with their dad. Having moved a lot in my life, this book made me feel seen, and that's why I really enjoyed it, and that's why it's so high up on the list. Few books really capture what it's like to grow up somewhere and then move, but still feel like part of both of those places. Really enjoyed the way that she unpacks and unlearns about herself, because she's obviously very resistant at the beginning of the book, and then she warms up to the fact well, I guess I live here now. Number 3, Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing. So this is by Matthew Perry. As a person who has struggled with addictions, I really saw a lot of myself in his book. The justifications that I made for myself when I was going through those phases of my life, and the things that made me even get to those points rooted from my childhood, rooted from not just from the caregivers and how they treated me like my parents, but also the relationships and the friendships that I had that got me to believing that I needed to do these things to feel happy and to feel alive and to feel normal. So this story is sad and it's really human, coming at it from such a real sense of understanding yourself. Number 2 is Think Like a Monk. This book is unlikely to be topped by any other nonfiction book this year. It's really beautiful that this man's life purpose is to tell people how to deal with their emotions and to bring all of these monk values as accessible into society as he can. And we need to be thinking of how can we be of more service to one another and how can we understand ourselves better. One of the biggest lessons of this book was that we are not defined by the experiences that happen to us. Our character is defined by how we react to those experiences. There's just like a piece of me that feels really seen and represented by another Asian person who cares so much about emotional vulnerability, of self-acceptance, that's what they want to do, is make other people more humble in that way. All right, number 1 on the book list. Here we go. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. So if you haven't read this book, it is one of the best books that I've ever read in my life. It's about 3 friends and how they go through life together as they make video games as a trio. And it's so human. It's so well written. I think it just kind of engulfs you in their world and you're so emotionally invested in what's happening next. And their thought processes, I feel, are so accurate to how we internalize things, like the micro movements that someone makes when they're talking to us, how they don't say something even though that you know that they want to say something. It's all of those nuances I think are really, really well done in this book. So that's my list. So if you're wondering how I read so many books, you can read this video on how I read 60 books in 2022. I have now read 29 books in 3 short months, and I guess I'm like kind of obliterating that, but basically anytime, any chance that I can, I'm reading. So that's it for me. Thank you for watching this very long video on the books that I've read so far. I'll see you in the next one. So thank you for watching. Bye!